Welcome to another episode of The Embedded, an ongoing exploration of the space between the glass and the technology. Today, in a two-part series, Wes Yun, the Director of User Experience at Motorola, talks about innovation, user experience, and the design process in the mobile industry.
Hey Wes, thank you so much for joining us. Really cool. You have an incredible background, been at a lot of really influential places, and I think it gives you a very distinct and unique vision in the industry. Can you tell us a little bit about the background that you have?
Yeah, sure. So I used to work in advertising agencies. Started out thinking that I was going to come out of school doing print. There's no money in print, turns out. So I decided to go into the internet. And at some point, the internet reached saturation. Everybody was a designer on the internet. And so trying to figure out what was next, looked at mobile. And at the time, mobile was still pretty boring and a pretty bad experience, mostly feature phones. So I thought that's where the internet was in '96. Transitioned to that, got to work for a company called Helio. One of the things that Helio did was, as an MVNO, it basically tried to solve the problem that everybody complained about, which is that every manufacturer complains about the carrier, every carrier complains about the manufacturer, so why not make them one? That didn't work out because a product called the iPhone, you may have heard of it.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, that came out. And then feature phones just sort of went by the wayside. So decided to come up to the Valley, Sunnyvale, and work at a company called Palm. And worked on the Web OS. That was incredibly successful. You probably have one right now.
I have 3.
Yeah, that's great. And then I went on to a company called RIM. Worked on BlackBerry, the tail end of BlackBerry 6. Not really involved in that too much, but mostly to do with the playbook, which that's how we know each other.
Exactly.
And now I'm at Motorola, and I'm the Director of User Experience doing cool stuff I can't talk about.
Aha, cool. Can you talk about what does it mean to be the Director of User Experience?
I think of user experience as broad or as limited as you want it to be, right? So the way I like to think about it as a designer, whether I have control of it or not, things like latency and or battery performance, things like that, are as much about the user experience as transitions and mental models and creating beautiful assets and graphics. I even think coming up with the branding and messaging of a product is part of the user experience.
Absolutely.
Even to the point of sale, where you want the customer to have a great experience. So I don't think of the creation of the product as the beginning and ending of my job. I think of it as, when you purchase a product, what is it that you're going to go share with your friends? What are you going to get excited about? What are you going to tweet about? These are the kinds of things that you have to think about and sort of design for. So one of the things, just going back to the earlier conversation, why do I pick these companies and make products that completely fail? I think it's interesting because it's only in those opportunities when a company is desperate and failing where you can do some truly interesting and innovative stuff. And so I think that if you were to go to a very successful company who would be reluctant to allow you to change and influence things, that would be no fun as a designer. So the risk is you go to a place that is not the pinnacle of design thinking, or at least isn't known for that. So why is it interesting at Motorola? Well, because it's a hardware manufacturer who does hardware extremely well. They've had success after success, but mostly in the hardware space. So how do you come to a company and help it transition to a great user experience company? And I think that that's one of the things that drew me to here.
So you've surrounded yourself with a really talented team.
Right.
What kind of how do you innovate? What are the processes that you use with your team to innovate?
Right. So I think one of the key things is to hire incredibly good people, smart, talented, motivated, self-motivated, really. So then my job isn't really a cheerleader or a motivator. Then what is my problem, or my problem to solve, is really about framing the problem correctly. I think that if you frame the problem correctly and you give the designer enough time and opportunity and guidance to come up with the right solution, that for the most part they'll exceed your expectation. That's completely something that I believe in. Usually where designers stumble in giving you the wrong result is when you've not framed the problem in the right way. So if you can articulate the problem in a solvable way, have them understand in a crisp, succinct problem statement that they have to go solve within a set time. If you've hired right, you're going to get the great result.
Right.
It's not my job to innovate, I don't think. My job is to allow designers to innovate.
So you surround yourself with the right team, but then you have to look forward. You have to try and figure out where we're going. So how do you look forward like that?
One way to do it is to look back and see what people have always done and find the pain points and then solve those pain points. Everybody pretty much has access to the same books, the same thinking. Everybody subscribes to TED. Everybody reads the TechCrunch and the Engadgets of the world. And there's a level of understanding and sophistication, I think. So whenever the new technology is available, everybody has access to it. And so the solutions aren't going to be radically different. So you'll see a lot of overlap. But what's different is how that problem is solved through the lens of a particular company. I'll take Siri on iPhone as an example, and Google voice search as an example. Two completely different approaches to the same problem, essentially. Google, you can do it in 27 different languages. Siri will tell you that it loves you.
Right, yeah.
One is useful, one is awesome and magical.
Right, yeah. I love, just earlier we were talking about you have your theory, your all-encompassing theory. I love it.
All-encompassing theory. It's very complicated. The one about being allowed the time to think about something. Right? Yeah. So I have this idea that you cannot rush. You cannot rush designers into thinking about the next great thing unless you've given them the time to really push themselves today. Right? And so when a designer enters an industry, say from print to digital, or from digital to car, or something like this, it usually takes them a couple of years to just get acclimated to the space, understand the technology, understand the limitations of the technology, understand the tools available. So usually the first 2 years you're just sort of ramping up. The next 2 years you're probably doing some interesting stuff that's at parity with whatever else is happening in the industry. And then the next couple of years you start doing something that's different. And then the next couple of years you stop doing the different things, just for the sake of doing something different. And then you start to get to a place that's interesting, where you start doing something that's novel and or moves the sort of needle of progress in terms of technology just a little bit forward. And I think that it really does take that amount of time for a designer to have gone through that process. You can't. It's a process that I've never seen rushed.
Right.
You can't just explain that to a designer and tell them, these are the things that I've known, and so you must know them too.
Right, right.
I think that designers in particular have or maybe just humans in general, have a way of having to go through the mistakes, have to go through the wins as well.
But you see the same thing mirrored in industries and companies as well, And I think that's something that we're seeing right now in the mobile industry too. I think we've had the flash and fancy things, and now we're searching for meaning.
Things like that, which were fun and or people thought were interesting at the time just no longer become interesting.
Right.
And people move on, but there are new like tropes or horrible things that people do
For sure.
today that we'll be laughing about in 5 years.
Yeah, I think that it's almost like the fashion industry. You look at stuff that you used to wear and think, my God, I can't believe I wore that.
Yeah, no, and it comes back around again, but it's never in the same sort of form that it once took, right? There's always, I do think that there's like some sort of progression, but it does seem cyclical depending on where you're standing.
So actually I want to stop it right there, because I think that we're heading into an area that's fascinating, interesting, but a lot more philosophical. And I want to tease the audience a little bit. So we're going to cut into 2 parts. That's the end of part A. We're going to have part B soon. But until then, join the conversation at weareembedded.com.